Houthis, Hamas, Hezbollah, what the hell is going on in the world? You know what all three of those groups have in common? They are supported by Iran and hunted by the US.
Decades later, Yassin established Hamas, and Palestinians rose against Israel's occupation. The year was 1987.
But it isn't Lebanon that's acting aggressively. It's a group called Hezbollah.
Welcome back to the channel and the last installment, and likely the most important in the Captain America trilogy, where we will discuss the Houthi rebellion and why America has been trying to snuff this out for years. If you haven't seen the other two videos where we discuss the Ukraine-Russia war or the Israel-Palestine-Hamas conflict, you need to check those out. Hopefully a link will pop up somewhere around here or probably at the end of this video. And you may have not even noticed them at all because I think YouTube is suppressing my content. I wonder why. Anyway, let's hop into it. Who are the Houthis? The Houthi rebels are a militant group of Zaidi Shia, which is a minority of minorities in the Islamic world. The movement started in the 80s under the leadership of, I'm gonna have to look at this name to pronounce this correctly, but it is Hussein Badr al-Din al-Houthi, in response to state-sponsored and Saudi-funded Salafi institutes being constructed in northern Yemen, which made the Zaidi Shia feel marginalized in their own country. Side note, throughout all of this, Saudi Arabia has been meddling in Yemeni affairs, trying to control what happens in the country for their own benefit. All the while, Yemen has been plagued with decades of internal struggle and civil wars. Now, as the Houthi movement was kind of coming together, Yemen was being led by Ali Abdullah Saleh, who was the president during that time. He was also a Zaidi Shiite, but not a member of the Houthis. He presided over the unification of the country and also several years of civil war. He initially took office in 1978, and many, including the CIA, didn't think his presidency would last more than 6 months. But defying all odds, he was reelected multiple times and something that he called dancing on the head of two snakes. Saleh was known for setting up a network of alliances between the military, civil, and tribal groups, fueling the divisions, playing one group against another to weaken his opposition. It also helped that Saudi Arabia was backing him at this time. Initially, the Houthi were trying to revive the Zaidi Shia religion and carve out a place for their way of life in a change in Yemen. But during the 2003 Iraq War, they took issue with the US-led invasion. Their leader criticized Saleh and called him a US-backed dictator. You see, Saleh had previously backed Iraq in the first Gulf War, which really hurt Yemen's economy. There were some 800,000 Yemeni citizens that had moved to Saudi Arabia for work.
More than 1 million Yemenis live in Saudi Arabia just across the border, and they send home about $2 billion annually.
And when Saleh didn't back the coalition, Saudi Arabia kicked them all out, a move that Saudi Arabia has repeated several times since. Yemen was already doing really bad economically, and this made matters worse. There were food shortages, hunger riots. It was not a pretty scene. So when the US invaded Iraq a second time, Saleh tried to position himself as an ally. Many in Yemen saw Saleh's support of the war as the same type of intervention that had disenfranchised the Zaidi Shiite in the 60s. Now, this was a pivotal point that really transformed the Houthis from being more of a religious movement into more like resistance fighters. Houthis themselves say it is their religious duty to fight unjust rulers. Houthis began protesting the war in the mosque in the capital city of Sana'a. In response, Salah sent troops and arrested 640 Houthi members. And in June of 2004, he put a $55,000 bounty for the capture of al-Houthi, which led to the first armed conflict between the Houthis and the Yemeni government. In September of that year, al-Houthi was killed by Yemeni forces, and eventually his brother Abdul Malik took up leadership of the movement. But al-Houthi's death did not have the impact that Saleh actually thought it would. It made the movement even stronger. Like I said before, think Gremlins. See, apparently Saleh was running Yemen into the ground and pocketing tens of billions of dollars during his administration. And while the protests in the capital were maybe led by the Houthis, it was the sentiment of the entire country that they wanted Saleh out. These protests and rallies reached hundreds of thousands of people, and by that time, several high-ranking officers deserted Saleh. And eventually, he was forced to step down in 2012. Now, all the while, Saudi Arabia was backing the Saleh-led Yemeni government because it was recognized internationally, but moreover, because of Yemen's strategic location to the Red Sea and their shared border. Saudi Arabia wanted to make sure they could control what was going on in the country. Iran backed the Houthis, although the Houthis rejected rejected any direct interference, but they did accept their financial support. So the Houthis got the weapons they needed and the funding to create a fighting force. And Iran was happy just to have somebody that was fighting against Saudi Arabia as well. You know, enemy of my enemy, because the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Now, what I can only call an epic plot twist. After his ousting as president, Saleh reemerged in 2015 with the Houthis. What? Yes, he is now friends with the same group he wanted to kill, and they wanted to kill him. Us writers like to call this foreshadowing. Saleh had actually been trying to leave the country, but when that failed and Saudi-led airstrikes hit his home, he decided to link up with the Houthis and become best friends. And while he was no longer president of Yemen, he had a military force that was still loyal to him. But their partnership did not last long, and it was contentious at best. Eventually, he broke ties with them and threw the Houthi movement under the bus. This guy is described as dancing with snakes, so none of this should come as a surprise. He flip-flopped once again and said he wanted to start a dialogue with the Saudi-led coalition. Also, no surprise, the Houthis killed him a few days later after this was announced.
Fight footage shows a body resembling former Yemeni president.
Now, when you hear Houthis or Houthi movement or Houthi rebels, it kind of really implies that this is some like ragtag band of freedom fighters, but nah. That could not be further from the truth. You see, the Houthis seem to have their act together. They've got missiles, they've got drones, they've got helicopters. They are a legit fighting force, and they've been doing it for decades in their own country. And they really dislike anyone meddling in Middle East affairs. So they hate America, they hate Israel, they hate Saudi Arabia, and probably a bunch of other people. At one point, the U.S. State Department designated them as terrorists. Then they were removed from the list. Then earlier this year, they were placed back on the list. And there's really a lot of back and forth of really how to classify this group. But I don't put a lot of stock in the terrorist designation list because they still don't have the KKK on there. So, you know, that list is bullshit. Now on to why the U.S. is involved. You see, in response to foreign intervention in the Middle East, the Houthis have taken to a sort of piracy.
Hello, boys and girls, or whatever. My name is Captain Jack Sparrow.
They are attacking commercial ships in the Red Sea, specifically ships that are headed toward the Suez Canal. This is a major choke point in that area and critically important to global trade for multiple industries. The Red Sea is positioned between Asia and Africa and borders 6 countries in Africa and 4 countries in the Middle East. Approximately 10% of all trade, and that means for the world, goes through there. And its GDP is at $1.8 trillion, which is now at risk because of the Houthis. And we are not talking like Somali pirates or something like that.
Look at me, sure. Look at me, sure. I'm the captain now.
The Houthis are putting on legit naval warfare. It's way more the look of a military operation than like a couple of guys on a skiff. Now, America is obviously allied with Saudi Arabia, although I'm not really sure how we pick our friends because let's be honest, Saudi Arabia doesn't share many of the values that we say that we have over here in the West. But I digress.
Because I spit hot fire.
A rogue faction backed by Iran controlling one, if not the most important shipping channels in the world is something that the U.S. cannot just sit by and watch. Insert the Navy. I can see it from the blood red sky. But again, like I said, this is not some ragtag band of starving farmers. This is a legit military, and they've been getting practice for decades. The U.S. also wants to avoid a war with Iran, which is backing the Houthis, and delving too deeply into these affairs could do just that. Honestly, it may be a foregone conclusion anyway. You see, as of the recording of this video, April 19th, 2024 at 1:48 p.m., Israel just struck back at Iran in what I can only describe as an escalating slapping contest. Here we go! That's it! Which America has been trying to play peacemaker, but it doesn't seem to be working. Now, not to get too off topic, but about 2 weeks ago, Israel bombed the Iranian consulate in Syria, killing 2 Iranian generals and 5 other officers. And this is basically because Iran backs all the groups that Israel is fighting. Iran retaliated about a week ago by sending hundreds of missiles and drones into Israel, most of which were intercepted. And the U.S. is like in the middle between both of them, holding their hands out saying, hey, let's not fight, let's talk about this.
Oh, you want something too, old man? Huh? No.
But you see, we've already souped Israel up and they basically have just shoved us out of the way and carried out another strike on Iran today. Like today. Like if you're watching this when it comes out and it came out today, then that's when it happened, today. Who really knows how all this is gonna end? But so you have a better understanding of what you really should be concerned about, you have Israel at war with Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, and Iran. And then you've got the US over here trying to shout from the sideline and not really get involved, but we are involved. And at the same time, we're trying to play matchmaker between Ukraine and Russia. And those are just the main conflicts. The world is a stage and we are obviously all actors. Our part may just be as cannon fodder for somebody else's war. But, you know, get informed and use your voice, because you might be pro-war when it's tens of thousands of miles away, but it hits different when it's at your doorstep. Anyway, like, share, subscribe, tell your friends about me. And next video, we will talk about how the world is just a giant Godfather sim, which you should be able to see by now with all this NATO war stuff going on.